Hello. I'm Roman. Thanks for inviting me here in the first place. And it feels great to kind of join into with Sonia a little bit with the topic of relationship of language and type or typography a little bit. I've been conducting researches about multilingual typography, multilingual design, mainly in the context of Asia and Europe. So I've spent a long time, in China, read a lot about Japan, Japanese typography, Korean, and basically places that are very far away. And when I, in recent years, tried to open myself up a bit from the Asian context to and say what kind of multilingual typography is around here in Europe, I kind of found out that apart from going very far away, there's also a lot in front of the door. And I would like to share one of my findings with you today. It is about a region in the heart of Europe, to quote you, Sonia. I drew that map of the region where we're sitting right in the center here in Warsaw right now. I didn't include any borders, because borders have changed so dramatically over the centuries, especially in that region. It would be ridiculous to select, which border lines to select. And it is, as I would call, like, I'm speaking about the time from about 1500 to the 19th century, especially. I'd call it a sphere of mutual influence, where Polish, German-speaking people, Lithuanians, Russians were, living together, working together, and sharing media together, and production techniques of media. I just found out that, for instance, the town where I studied in Germany back in the I think 20 years ago, it was in Halle, which is like on the map is right to the left. It's south of Berlin. And I found out that it had close ties to Koenigsberg, which is now Kaliningrad, present-day Kaliningrad, especially because of the local Reformation movement in the 16th century. There were a lot of links, and they shared a lot of writings and books during that period of time. So I found out it was a rather pleasing find to me. There were a lot of connections between, places that are, seem very separate right now. And so this is the kind of the setting that I, chose for a research. When I was in Halle, there's a huge archive in a former orphanage founded by August Hermann Franke, who was one of the leading persons in the Pietism. Do you say Pietism or Pietism? Nobody knows, maybe? Pietism is right, I'm sorry. So basically Protestant movement, and right in Halle happened to be the place where he used to work and publish his thoughts and books, and they were printed right on the spot. And I was like, this is actually no original, it's a scan from a scan. It's a reprinted version of an original print I bought in the museum shop by accident, and this is why it's only black and white now. Anyway, I was so curious about, the fact why did they mix Roman type and blackletter so frequently? I felt very intrigued to that, and although I kind of knew from other sources, it was kind of frequent to do that in the German-speaking community, and mainly in what was Prussia by the time. I asked myself, what did it mean? Why did they, spend so much effort to mix typefaces? It's not multilingual, obviously, at first sight, because it's German. There are some Latin terms in it, which I feel, from modern perspective, are German too. For instance, we can say year, or we can also say anno, which is kind of Latin, but it feels also like a German word. We call it foreign terms. But anyway, I was like curious, like why did they do it? Why? It's a lot of work to mix all those typefaces. I started to analyze a bit, and found out like if you color, I just chose some random colors to highlight the different typefaces or styles used. You see, in the headlines you see swash forms, like decorative forms of black letters, especially the initial capital letters. You see kind of average black letter type, which I highlighted in yellow, which is just normal average text kind of type. Then you have Roman for the I would say the Latin foreign terms in the language. Then you have italics, the Roman italics to highlight. In this case, it's a quote from the Bible, which is highlighted in a way, a psalm. And then you have capitalized forms to highlight parts of the German text, such as, you see it on the lower right, there's God, Gott. So the O, there are two capital letters after one another to highlight God, as the Lord. That always intrigued me, like, what is about it? Here you see it isolated from, from the image. I continue to investigate, and this is a page from that booklet, which is actually one of the founding pamphlets for the orphanage in Halle, and it's a kind of a, how do you say in English, a codex for the laws and the regulations of all sorts, and especially it's also a kind of business report. And I still notice that even in the running text, even in the average text, you have that mixing going on, a kind of code mixing between the black letter and the Roman, the Latin, and I try to further analyze. And then you have also decorative elements such as the ornament, which is on top, which is not referring to any language. Looking closer, you see, why are so many, especially in the beginning of the text, which is, the leading sequence of the text, you see so many swash capitals, like the decorated, beautiful black letter, flourished kind of capital letters, and I noticed that you find them always in more significant places of the text, in more meaningful words, such as here on what is like most of the first page, the Duke is addressing you. It's like he's this the author is the Duke Frederick III, and he's greeting you as a reader, and that's why so many swash caps have been added to emphasize his greatness, and and that continues through the text in terms of important personal names and whatever. So there's always a meaningfulness about the selection of this kind of typeface. But this is nothing new for you. I think everybody has heard of this before. Like until, and I looked more closely and I noticed, it even went much further, that for instance, a term like Universität, which is university obviously in German, was mixed. Like in the word was split up between a Roman section and that black letter section, like meaning, okay, universi is actually Latin, and and tät is German. So they were very precise at that time in, like mainly in what used to be Prussia. It was not yet the kingdom. How do you say Duchess? No. Duchy, I'm sorry, thank you so much. The Duchy of Prussia, which is, before it became a kingdom, at the end of the 17th century. And, why were they so precise? And I always kind of felt like it doesn't fit to my researches in multilingual typography, because it's, to my eyes, it was not multilingual. It was just a normal German word. But then I read more into the language history, the linguistic history about, the role of the Latin language in Europe, until I found out that especially, in German-speaking communities and of course, also in Poland and in England as well, people were not regarded as native speakers of Latin. That was for the French and for the Italians, of course, that in the 15th century or 14th, 15th, 16th century, people still regarded themselves as speaking Latin in the Latin-speaking world. But that changed with time, obviously, and people started to feel like speaking French and Italian, and Latin became less and less important. But in Germany, like what is now Germany, in German-speaking contexts, there was never the feeling that it was always a foreign language, because it's a Roman language and German is a Germanic language. So there had always been the sense of Latin being actually a foreign language to German speakers. And that's obviously also the reason why they were so, at that time, so much into distinguishing even parts of words. So I was happy with that, because it's, in a way, it used to be a multilingual issue. And it's only now it's not multilingual anymore, because the influence of Latin has receded over time. Until in the 19th century, people did not think of Latin as a foreign language anymore, but adapted the concept more and more of the foreign term, which is very, very frequent to us now. We speak in foreign terms. That means terms that are actually part of our language, but they have different origins. It's a different concept from that. Here, two languages come together in a very strict basis. To give you another example of this beautifully typeset document, this is a business list with expenses and income, kind of a business report, and all the different currencies are marked, and they are, depending on whether they're of Latin origin or of German origin, they're also in different kinds of typefaces. So this is a very, you get a very colorful page if you highlight it. From that on, by the way, does anybody tell me the time?
Oh no, we're still.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Stop me.
Yeah. I will trust you.
Stop me violently, please. So, what happened to what happened to start my interest in this? At first, did I think it was like a rare find? But then I found more and more of this stuff, and I was also very happy to see this bilingual edition of the Edict of Brandenburg, which possibly many people know here. It was this was a document published by I'm not sure now. Was it Frederick? Oh, it was the Duke Frederick, right? Frederick III, as far as I know. I'm not really sure about that. It should be him. Or was it Frederick II? I'm sorry, I forgot. It's so many Fredericks, and it's a very confusing kind of family tree. So it's one of them anyway. In 1685, I think it must be the Duke. So he published this document, which has, I think, about 16 pages or something, allowing the French Protestants into Prussia, or like inviting them to come. The what was called the Huguenots, or Hugenotten in German, the French Protestants who were not allowed to stay in France, who were like thrown out by the French king, who was Catholic. And so the Protestants were invited to come to Prussia, because actually Prussia had a resource problem. So you would say today they were in lack of specialists. In German, a beautiful word, Fachkräftemangel. They were in need of specialists of all sorts of trades, and so actually they were very happy with the French Protestants coming and bringing their skills to Berlin, and that's why it was very important for the Duke to do that. It was actually handed from town to town until it reached the French border. This kind of pamphlet to reach the population before they on their way out of France to receive the good news. Hey, let's go to Prussia. And you see, it's bilingual. So this time it's really bilingual typography. It's German on top and French below. And you see, again, on the German side, you see the code mixing, which I would describe as style switching because it's not multilingual in that sense. I call it as, both is Latin. It's Latin script, but two different styles of the Latin script. So I'd call it style switching in lack of other terms. And underneath you have the classic, Latin typography with italics to emphasize something and whatever. So to show you another spread page of this, the leading page of this document. Here in this case, the ornament on top refers to both sides. So it's the opener for both languages. And that, German being on the left corresponds with it being on top on the title page, because it's the leading part in that sense. Like the Prussians are inviting the French in, and it's followed by the French when you go in terms of reading direction. Okay, but still you see the same, the same game of style switching on behalf of the German side. It's actually a very beautiful document. I don't have any further pages because it would lead to too much, but the paragraphs are always together, they're synced. No, so normally the French is shorter than the German, so usually there's some more space on the French side. And it reminds me so much about what I've been doing in Chinese English or Chinese German bilingual typography, where always the Chinese texts are shorter than the German texts and whatever. So it's really familiar to me. Okay, in 1806, when another Frenchman came to Prussia, Napoleon, with other intentions, things were different already. So, like in 1806, the German-speaking community had already done away with the principle of, Latin being a foreign language. A stronger sense of national identity, a nationalism in the language emerged, or had emerged even before that. And you see on the German side of the text, which I'm going to tell you more about right now, you don't see any style switching anymore, despite 2 minutes, yeah? Despite one spot. You see it on top right, ne. It's the marshal. He was obviously too French to be set in black letters. It's, telling the people of Magdeburg their rights and duties after the occupation. This is a Polish sample. When, from times when prints on books were printed in, by German printers or by Polish, German printers especially in Koenigsberg, which is now Kaliningrad, which was a huge hub of book printing. And I just showed you this example that, Polish has been set at least some time also with black letters, but it had quickly disappeared afterwards. But in Koenigsberg also emerged the first Lithuanian book. That's pretty famous and very important for Lithuanian national identity as well. It's a catechism printed in, I forgot when, like in 15 something. And it uses the same, the same mix of Schwabacher, black letter Schwabacher, and, Latin Antiqua, serif. And even they separate there is no rule book, so there's no rules of typography yet, so people are kind of doing trial and error. So there's a line break, like the word prasti. I don't know what it means. I think it means bad. It's like about what you shouldn't do and what you should do, something like this. It's like hyphenated and then continued in black letter, the same word. On the other hand, I found these beautiful samples of early Lithuanian orthography, which was very influenced by the way the Germans were using their script, such as Rashta. And nowadays it's written like on the right you have an S and Karen, and they used the German SCH to for German readers it's very familiar. It means sh. So it makes kind of sense. Or like the German SZ ligature, which is actually, it used to be S and Z, which now is like in many serif typefaces it's more like S and S together. It makes sense that uskima, I'm not sure about the spelling, is now written with a Z and Karen and not with an S and Karen, because it's more, I think the sound is more hard. So it used to make sense to use the German SZ. It was more close to the sound. Anyway, done. Give me an extra minute? Yeah, thanks. So this is how it looks like today when you really want to reproduce texts of the time This case, it's done by a friend of mine who's producing for a publisher who's publishing philosophy, German philosophy, and they have to highlight all. They have to keep everything that had been different before in the typography, such as Blackletter, or even in this case, it's more like pieces of handwriting in a text, and they're using many different typefaces. I don't know if you can distinguish. They're using Bodoni and Garamond and sans serif and italics and even other scripts, which is making it. I mean, they don't have any other choice, but it's pretty difficult to understand and to learn like what means what. And you need a very difficult, legend to explanation to really get it. And so when I was trying to do this talk and prepare it, I found myself not finding any typefaces to depict what I wanted to express. And so, back to the drawing board, I tried to make my own one, which I was at least like I wanted the X height and the baseline to be the same. So that was the main purpose. And I didn't, I felt too clumsy in selecting typefaces, and they rarely had the beautiful ligatures and whatever, or the German umlaut, which is used to be made with an E on top of the letters, and you have to have that technology. And so I did this, at least it's partly done, and to try whether it may be possible to to CSS this, to produce a typeface family that you can use for the web or for electronic publishing, the electronic versions of these old documents. Maybe it may be useful. It might be useful to have this kind of historic feel to them, to really understand what is being lost otherwise. And so I CSS'd it and tried to did some testing with some texts in this kind of style, and was kind of satisfied with how it works. There could even be tools to help editors to reproduce texts, but mainly it's important to implement all the open types, such as all the diacritics, the mark to base, and especially the ligatures. And as everybody knows, Safari doesn't support so much OpenType, and it's not going to work. In Firefox, it works, and as I've recently heard in Chrome, it also works. And I'm kind of trying on to produce this little typeface for academic purposes, hopefully, whatever. It's all about this, guys, too. These actually beautiful, strange forms of letters, which I would be very curious to see used in your machine, how they might sound. Probably not much different. I mean, maybe like or maybe like exactly. Om, sweet Om. Thank you so much.